Redditors who knew men caught on to catch a predator before the show, what were they like? I went to school with Rob Klein. From what I can remember of him was that he was quiet and kept to himself. He never did anything to label himself a creep. His excuse for showing up has to be one of the worst. Rob said he showed up to let the 13-year-old girl know he wasn't going to be able to hang out after making the 2-hour drive there. He also throws his brother under the bus for the child porn that is on his computer. That's the excuse like half of them gave, wasn't it? I just drove here to tell her to be careful about who she talks to online. And you brought wine and condoms to do that? I like to get drunk and jack off with condoms on, sir. I was roommates with a person on the show for a bit. His name was Dave and he was one of the few people they let go when they started having the sheriff's department waiting outside. Felt bad for the guy, completely gullible and too nice of a dude. It was the Riverside, California episode where two really young guys show up at the house. Basically my buddy was out in Cali visiting a friend that told him that he needed to detour to drop in on this girl he's been chatting with. No age was mentioned and it's not like he could say no as the only car they had was his friend's in California's car. So he's like, sure, I'm down to tag along, immediately regretting the decision when Chris Hansen pops out. They only interviewed his friend and he just had to stand there nervously guzzling a Rockstar waiting for it to be over. Funnily, when Chris told them they could go, they thought they were in the clear and were giggling on the way out until a bunch of cops in tactical gear jumped them in the driveway. Lol. Like I said, they let him go with no issues as he never had contact with the girl and had only been in state for less than 24 hours. Really sucked though, cause when the episodes were still available online that whole episode had his face as the thumbnail. Oh shit, this guy knows the tag-along. He's like a mystery among the TCAP community. Rapey, extremely rapey. Was someone from my hometown in NY. Went to school with their younger sister. After he graduated high school, he did everything he could to hang out with much younger kids. Always wanted to buy booze for us or roll up a joint and smoke us out in his van. Never touched me, but there were rumors of him molesting a 12-year-old in sleepaway camp. I knew a dude like this. He lived on the same block as a friend. He was 21 and drove an old van. Hung out with a bunch of 14 to 16-year-olds. Drove everyone around so they could drink and smoke. He ended up fooling around with a 14-year-old. He was told by someone's dad that if he was seen hanging around with them again, the cops would be called. Molesting a 12-year-old in sleepaway camp. What's sleepaway camp? I thought that was a shitty horror franchise. I was one dude's RA in university. He was a seriously weird dude, but was relatively friendly, came out to all of the campus events, and was not suspected of being a predator at all by any of us in the dorms back in those days. He was busted on TCAP about 2 to 3 years after I graduated, so probably sometime 2003 to 2005. How was he weird? Probably something to do with fucking children, but I'm not sure. Well, he said it wasn't predatory stuff that made him weird. Yes, Maddie Nash. He was creepy and kept trying to get me to go to Burning Man. When I told him I didn't think that was a good idea because I had a 10-year-old kid at the time, he said I should bring my kid. Now I don't think he was interested in my kid at all, but I did tell him I thought that would be super creepy to bring a kid to Burning Man with a bunch of people on E! This was in 2001. He came over to my house under the guise of talking business and then put the moves on me. I turned him down and sent him home to his wife. Burning Man sounds like hell on earth, to be honest. I only know about Burning Man because of the Malcolm in the Middle episode on it. I'm guessing this is the same for 99% of people who don't live in the US. Such a great show, I have no reason to believe it's not similar to how they show it. Another not on the show but close encounter story. My dad pulled my brother and I from a fancy expensive elementary school and put us in public school despite him really wanting us in a private school. He said after meeting the principal a couple of times, he had a weird feeling, strong enough to override my mom not having felt the same way. We were starting 1st and 3rd grade and then switched to a new school. 6 years later the guy was busted for molesting a couple of his young students, girls and boys. My dad told me the story years later, right after another strange incident, when he and I were on a train and when we got off he had us stuck around a lot of people and pillars. I didn't get why. The dude across from us had been absolutely hardcore eyeing me, a 15-year-old dressed for opera girl, but I figured that was, regrettably, normal, but Dad said when he's eyeing me too, it's a problem. I trusted my dad about people ever since. Holy crap, your dad is on the ball. I knew the cop from, I think Florala, Alabama that was arrested on the show. He had guns and rope in his vehicle when he went to meet the girl. Super creepy stuff. When he was a sheriff's deputy in Florida, he would come into my job frequently. So, I didn't know him on a personal level, but I did talk to him on a regular basis. He was a really nice, respectful guy. He seemed to be a good cop too. I was shocked when I saw the episode. You never really know what goes on in someone's bedroom. Here is part of the episode, some URL. Oh my god, this guy got no time, he obviously has done this before. He has a chainsaw, tarp, rope and a boat anchor in his car with him. Jesus fucking Christ, that's a serial killer kid if ever there was one. I didn't know the person directly, but I worked at a company that had an employee caught on the show. This was particularly problematic, as the company was Nickelodeon Animation. Everyone who knew the guy was actually pretty shocked. It was particularly rough for his girlfriend at the time, as she also worked at the studio, so there was no hiding from it. For their part, Nickelodeon instituted rigorous background checks for every new employee after the incident, with zero tolerance for any misdeeds involving children. Those background checks are what keeps this lore alive though, as the process is much more intensive than any other studio. I remember that episode and recall they specifically pointed out on the show that he worked for Nickelodeon. That seems like unnecessarily fanning flames. Oh, I can actually answer this one. He legit was always trying to sleep with men that were way too young for him, albeit just barely legal, and we made jokes all the time to him about how he was going to wind up on that show. We literally called him Herbert. It was the opposite of he was the last person I would suspect situation. I never expected Dwight to go postal, it's always the last person you expect, and I always expected Dwight to go postal. It's never the person you most suspect. It's also never the person you least suspect, since anyone with half a brain would suspect them the most. Therefore, I know the killer to be Phyllis, aka Beatrix Bourbon, the person I most medium suspect. Michael. I was doing so well. I fortunately don't know any predators, but I did work with a young woman who had worked on the show. She did the post-production voiceovers for the catfishing texts between the detectives and the predators. She was the voice of the non-existent teen girl. Like the "oh I don't know much about sex, I'm only 13" lol stuff. Apparently she was a production assistant or intern at the production office, and one of the producers was like, "We need somebody with a young sounding voice, you say something," and she did, and he was like, "Perfect. Come with me," and she recorded all the dialogue. Right after she told a bunch of us at work, this was a couple years later at a different job, I went home that night and watched an episode and could tell it absolutely was her voice. Hilarious. I've always wondered about the girls who do the voices, haha. That's so interesting that they picked a member of the crew. It's probably cheaper as they're already paying them at some level and don't have to audition and hire someone new. I think this show had more to do with the demise of Yahoo Messenger than anything else. Yahoo got sued by someone who was caught in a sting like this. They were found to be complicit in the crime. I remember reading about it. They paid him a big settlement. If you're good at something, never do it for free? Huh? A pedo got paid because a company helped catch him being a pedo? I don't know anyone from the show, but I was very close to my father, who is a predator. Middle-aged geeky dude, had 2 daughters. I was 18, my sibling 20 at the time of arrest, bit socially awkward but known as a really kind guy. Always generous with his time, worked at a community center helping underprivileged kids learn how to use computers. Yeah, it turns out he was molesting at least 2 girls from there, 4 and 8, and hosting a child porn ring from the center's server. No one suspected it. He loved kids, but that's cause he had to, right? He'd fix everyone's computers for free and help them get into work. Really great upstanding citizen. He got 16 years and everyone else got a lifetime of trust issues and trauma. That sounds scarily close to my father, but I'm the youngest and he didn't get the long in jail. How do you cope with knowing what he did? I struggle with it a lot and try not to think about it. It's weird trying to reconcile the person I loved as a kid with the predator who hurt other little kids like me. I'm pretty late to the game, but my husband worked with / good friends with one of the men on the first ever episode. We were all in our late 20s, he was a highly educated, well-liked guy. He was nice, funny as hell. We were all shocked. He got busted trying to sleep with a 12 or 14-year-old girl. He got a good lawyer and so the TCAP didn't show the video of him getting busted, only a photo that he shared in the chat with who he thought was the young girl. We read the chat log between him and the girl. It was disgusting. He called my husband one time after the show aired to say that this was the first time he did anything like this, and he got caught up in the taboo nature of it. Never spoke to him again.